Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Bicep community call of April 2025. Let's get started. Before we head on to updates, I took out the slide in which we talk about the community and the Bicep community. But basically, if you have any questions, raise your hand or type it in chat. We have our engineers and PMs from various teams in the chat to answer any questions, and we would love to be able to hear from you directly. Cool. So we have a good amount of features and bug fixes in 0.35, which will be at the end of this month. That will be a little bit later than usual because we decided to have our community call earlier in the month. So be a little patient. Hopefully it'll be out in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So for the first one, secure outputs GA, this has been a feature that is has been experimental and it is now GA. Basically, it permits the usage of the secure decorator for module outputs. A lot of people have been really excited about this one. Hopefully, it should be out for everyone, but it is still experimental until the end of the month, so make sure to include that flag in the Bicep config file if you want to try it out now. Support for Azure modules and local deploy. This is a breaking change, and so any Bicep file using this functionality will have to put target scope local in addition to the local deploy experimental flag. So anytime you want to use Azure modules, you have to put that in the file of every single Bicep file. We'll have a little bit more information documentation on this once the release is out. Resource existence checks. This is something that we've been really excited about and a lot of people have been asking about. So the resource existence checks will be experimental for now with the flag only if not exists. And here's a little code sample at the bottom. Basically, it will not deploy unless it does not exist. So if it exists, it checks and it'll skip the resource definition. If you have any questions, please put them in chat. We have our engineer who worked on this take here, hopefully. And Anthony can answer any questions as well. We expanded use secure value for secure inputs to use secure type information. This is a smaller linter change, but with our new release, we should now flag any places where someone is using a non-secure parameter in a field that is annotated as secure. Again, we'll have a little bit more information when the version 0.35 is out. Extendable param files, bug fixes. We're working on moving this to GA, hopefully in the next couple of releases. We just want to make sure all of the bugs are fixed before we move it into GA so that no one runs into many issues. That being said, if you guys would like to try it out and let us know of any bugs that come up, that would be great and help us move forward closer to GA. Bicep param support in VS. We now have Bicep param support in Visual Studio. Really excited about this. I think people have been asking for this for a little bit. So yeah, our engineer on the VS Code side, Stephen Weatherford, has been working on this and working on a lot of other VS Code. So we really appreciate him helping us out with this. And last, URI functions. We have parse URI and build URI. So the URI functions will essentially take a string, make it into a URI object, be able to utilize the components of the URI such as scheme, host, port, path, and query. And here are some examples of how to use these. Like I said, it won't be out until the end of this month or early next month, so please be patient in using these. And we'll have documentation out soon. Cool. We can move on to our first topic. Sydney?
Hello, everyone. Let me turn my camera on. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Sydney, and I am one of the PMs working on Bicep. Let me share my screen. Cool. And today I just wanted to make sure folks were aware of this Bicep deploy GitHub action and do a really simple demo on how to get started with it. So you'll find it in the marketplace for GitHub Actions, and I'll show you how to get this as well. So I have a really simple demo here. I'll pull up my Bicep main.bicep file. All I'm doing essentially is deploying a storage account. So this isn't really so important as the action to deploy it. So within the GitHub experience, if we go to Actions, you can create what's called a workflow. So if we do a new workflow, I'm just going to pick this simple workflow for now. And then you'll see here on the right side, there is a marketplace. And if you search for Bicep, you'll be able to see this Bicep deploy action. You can directly copy and paste from here, but I think it's actually a little bit easier to get started with it if you go to the marketplace listing, which has some more documentation on the various features of the action and how to use them. So if we look at the key configuration options here, you'll see that this action allows you to either do a deployment or a deployment stack. And as you know, we see deployment stacks as sort of the modern evolution of deployments. So we recommend using this when possible. For the operation, you can create, validate, or preview changes. So this is like being able to use the validate or Whatif commands. It gives you various scope options. You can specify the parameters file and the template file, Whatif analysis, and then these are some specific actions for stacks. If you scroll down here for usage, you can see some simple examples of doing a deployment, say at the subscription scope with a create operation, or a stack similarly. This action does take dependency on the Azure resource login action and the checkout action to check out your code. There's some more documentation here as well, but what I think is most easy to use is to start with these end-to-end workflows because it incorporates the login and the checkout command for you. So we look at the deployment example. This is going to give you a great starting place to copy from for a create deployment. So we're going to copy this. And we will go back to this workflow that I was creating and just paste that in. And now we can edit any particular things we may want to change. You can see here, this is the checkout action, grabbing my code for me, and then the login action. And then we have the create for using the Bicep deploy action. I want to do a deployment, create, name, say deployment, that's fine. I'm going to use the resource group scope. I've already put my Azure subscription ID, tenant ID, and client ID in my secrets. I can show quickly how to do that after this. And then resource group name, mine is actually called sample RG, very creative. And then instead of a parameter file, I'm going to pass in my template file. And it's just main.bicep, as I showed you before. So that's just a quick getting started. Let's name this as a community call. Great. And then if we go to actions, we can see that this deployment is in progress. The workflow is kicking off. While that is going, I will show you that if you go to settings and then under secrets and variables and actions, this is where I put in my Azure client ID, subscription ID, and tenant ID. So I didn't need to specify them in plain text in the YAML itself. Back here. And one thing I will say is with this action, we're really in a phase where we're looking for sort of validation if this is useful for folks, if people are using it, if there are any issues with it or feature requests. So it's a really good time to check it out and provide us with feedback, because we are making decisions around how much more to invest in this action. As you can see here, it is under the Azure project, and then the repo is called Bicep deploy. If you want to check out the code and also open any issues with feature requests or bugs you may have hit. Cool. Looks like our deployment was successful. So we'll just show you in my portal view. We'll do a little refresh here. And you'll see that my deployment was just successful. So that's a really simple getting started with the GitHub action. Happy to answer any questions. Looks like there are a few that have been already answered in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks, Sydney. I'm not sure if we want to address some of these questions, at least for the recording, for anyone who won't be able to access the chat. Let me see which questions.
Yeah.
Would you need to include the template file if you include the param file?
I've answered these questions in the chat as well, so I'm happy to just mention what I've said. Yeah, so if you're using Bicep parameters file, then we discover the Bicep file from the using declaration there, so you don't have to supply it if you're using Bicep parameters.
Cool. Another question that came up, does this support Git other than GitHub and GitLab?
This is purely a GitHub action we're talking about here, so this is just for GitHub workflows.
Thank you. And another question that a lot of people are thumbs upping, any plans to port this for Azure DevOps pipelines?
Sydney, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. So there are some existing tasks in ADO that you can use. In particular, there is the Azure CLI task or the Azure PowerShell task that allow you to have some customization around your deployment. So I don't think we have any immediate plans to port this action over, but if that is something that folks would find useful, or they have particular scenarios around why they would want to use that, that could be compelling for us.
Cool, thanks. And can this action be used with workload identity federation?
I will just share my screen really quick. So as I mentioned, this action takes a dependency on the Azure login action. And so these are the different types of login that are supported today with the Azure login command. So if you are looking for maybe a different experience, this would be the repo to go to and file an issue. I can link that in chat as well.
Someone asked, why do you use GitHub secrets and not GitHub variables? The values you showed are not very secret.
This one I've actually never really been that clear on. Like if you're using OpenID Connect, then you really just have a tenant ID, a subscription ID, and a application ID. None of these things are technically secret. So far, I've seen the official documentation for tooling like recommend storing these things as secrets. And I think there are some people who want to safeguard their subscription ID and not have it show up in logs. But I think if you don't consider these values secrets, then I think you could store them in variables.
Hopefully that answers your question. If you would like to follow up, please raise your hand or put in chat. Someone said, I can test this, but when using the validate operation, does this properly fail or halt the workflow?
Sorry, can you repeat? Does it properly fail / halt the workflow? So I think one practice would be to like have a validate workflow separate from your actual deployment workflow, or you can also use the outputs feature in GitHub Actions to pass in a stop, I guess, to your pipeline.
And then just to clarify, if you're using the validate option, then it will fail if the actual validation fails.
Good. Any plans to support Git generally? Someone said they aren't allowed to use GitHub or Azure DevOps for security reasons.
No immediate plans. I don't think, again, if that is a compelling scenario, I'd also like to understand more as to like what exactly you would be looking for in that experience, and what your concerns are.
And it looks like Alex also responded. I'm not sure if Alex is in the call right now, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, I'm in the call. So Git is just the source control utility, source control system. So all these tasks end up having to be purpose built for each CI/CD tool, whether it's ADO pipelines or GitHub Actions or GitLab or the litany of others. So
yeah, the idea is that it would be
something...
for support other CI/CD tools just besides GitHub, because we aren't allowed to use GitHub. So
what
we use other
CI/CD tool do you use, Rob?
GitHub. I'm GitLab, sorry, which is what I just asked the
GitLab.
question. Yeah, but there's other ones we are allowed to use too. So the thing is, we can't use GitHub because it's hosted by Microsoft, right? So we need a tool that we can use that is like we can install anywhere, like in a closed area or something like that. So we don't have internet access.
Makes sense. I think GitLab is probably the third most popular, at least as it relates to Azure focus usage. So if we're able to get through ADO pipelines, GitLab would probably be the next one that we would consider. But in the meantime, you should be able to use Azure CLI or Azure PowerShell in GitLab.
Yeah, which is what we had been used, which you had been using. But this is nice to have that action just there that you can just look it up. So
yeah, makes sense.
The other thing to point out, by the way, is you can always use Azure CLI. Like a lot of this functionality is available through Azure CLI commands, so you can always fall back to that as an option.
Well, thanks for clarifying, everyone. I think that's all the questions that are on this topic. But yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in chat or raise your hand or ask them at the Q&A in the end. All right, so our next topic will be AZ functions, and Joshua Murai will demo that. Josh?
Okay. Share my screen. Able to see my screen?
Yep.
So, hey everyone, I'm going to be demoing you the availability zone functions in Bicep. This is a feature we've been working on for a while now, so I'm excited to show it to you guys today. So, just the general background and the challenge with the availability zones is that it has inconsistent zone mapping. So, logical zones are numeric codes like 1, 2, 3, for example, that map to different physical zones across regions for Azure services, like for Azure services, and each region may have different zone mapping. So like physical zones will have an East US AZ1 across different subscriptions. And this leads to a lot of complexity, actually. So with multi-sub deployments, it requires a lot of consistent zone distribution. And without proper mapping, like the workloads may not be evenly distributed across zones, and this can lead to also scalability issues. So this is the challenge that we're trying to resolve here with the availability zone functions. So just as general background, as I described before, the logical zones are consistent numeric identifiers like 1, 2, 3. as strings across different subs, and the physical zones are the region, and then usually AZ after it with the like 1, 2, or 3, or more, depending on what region has the number of zones. So we have 4 functions for you guys. The first 2 are like to logical zone, which converts a physical zone to a logical zone, and then there's also to physical zone, which is vice versa, the logical zone to the physical zone. And then we also have array versions for bulk conversions. So, for example, 2 logical zones and 2 physical zones, where if you want to convert multiple zones. So the inputs it takes is there's 3 arguments. There's a sub ID, which would be the mapping where it's being evaluated at, and then the location. This is where the resource is being deployed. So, for example, East US. And then finally, it's a zone. So if you're using 2 physical zone, your argument would be the logical zone. And if you're using 2 logical zone, it would be the physical zone. And the outputs, as I mentioned before, so if you were to use 2 logical zone, you would get a string and return back. So, for example, if you were to like enter East AZ1, and if that region were to be mapped to the logical zone 1, then you would get the string back 1, and vice versa for the physical zone. If you were to enter the string 1, you would get back a string East US AZ1. And for the array versions, you would just have the array as an argument, and it would just return to you back the corresponding respective physical and logical zones for each mapping. So I have a Bicep demo to show you guys, and it's a simple Bicep file that deploys a couple of resources like a storage account and a public network, and it's just going to demonstrate to you how the zone placement using logical zones work, and how it converts between the logical and physical zones. And I also have the multiple array version. And I also have another deployment that simulates the cross sub scenario. So it'll show to you guys how different logical zones will map to different physical zones across different subscriptions. Cool. So this is the Bicep file. I kind of described what resources it has and what it's going to demonstrate. And I already have the deployment ready to go. It's already been deployed. So to save you guys time, I'm just going to bring it up here. So this is something, for example, how it would look like. So you'd have a logical zone, and for example, it would be 1, and then the physical zone mapping for the sub ID in this region would be East US AZ1. And if you were to use their multiple array version, you can see how it returns the corresponding physical zones. One important thing to note is that it's not necessary that the logical zone, for example, in this case, 2, maps to East US AZ2. It's actually East US AZ3. So that's one thing to note. And for the cross sub deployment, you can see that there's 2 sub IDs, and the mappings for each sub ID is not necessarily the same across different regions. So you can see in this case, the logical zone 1 has 2 different physical zone mappings for sub IDs. So East US AZ1 and East AZ2, and this also is the same thing for the logical zones 2 and 3. So yeah. So some key takeaways I just want to like just get the point across is that the logical zones in this case they just remain consistent across all subscriptions, and also the physical zones those may vary between subscriptions, and the zone mapping functions, they just ensure consistency across all availability patterns, and this really simplifies the multi-sub deployments and disaster recovery. So with that being said, yeah, that concludes my demo and presentation. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, great demo. I think we have one. Is this all leveraging the checkzone peers API? And I think, Marcin, do you want to share your answer in the call?
Yeah. So these functions don't actually use this API. They just use the ARMS locations API, which basically for a given subscription, it returns a list of locations that subscription has access to, and in there are availability zones. Mapping can be included. So there's basically a list of physical and logical zones for that location. And basically in Azure, these are kind of randomly distributed. So different subs and different regions, like different subs in the same locations, will have different mappings from logical to physical. So these functions that Josh just demoed basically help you figure out the mapping if you want to have a consistent physical zone. But if you are using any zone redundant resources, or let's say you're like enabling availability zones on Cosmos DB, or you're putting a VM scale set on like multiple availability zones, then you don't have to use these functions.
Cool. Thanks, Marcin. Let's see. Will this part of the location API be brought up to AZ CLI PowerShell?
We will have to follow up. I'm not sure what the plans are there. I don't actually own this API, but we can find out. It would be helpful if you can open an issue for this on the Bicep GitHub repo, and we'll try to get you an answer.
Awesome. Is the link for the function available? Oh, documentation. Yeah, so I mean, this should be part of this upcoming release. Is that correct, Marcin or Josh?
I don't know if we actually got the documentation out yet, so there may be a bit of a delay with the docs, but we will include a snippet in the release notes to explain how to use these.
Sounds good.
And then Marcin,
Thanks for clarifying.
in terms of which release it's going to be part of.
Yes, that one. Good point. So we are still waiting. There's a bug fix that we're rolling out as part of the release of ARM itself. And if that finishes, it's almost done. There's like a few regions left. Like if that finishes before the upcoming Bicep release, then these functions will show up in the upcoming Bicep release. Otherwise, it will be the next one, most likely.
Cool. Thanks, Marcin. All right. Hopefully that's all the questions for that topic. And next we have Dan.
Hello, folks. I'm also joined today by Eric Quito and Jason Du from the team. Yeah, if you can go to the next slide, Stephanie, please. So I just wanted to give a very quick update on our GA plans. As I think originally we'd indicated that we were trying to GA towards the end of March. We've released a bunch of new things this year, but we're now kind of like on course for, we hope, our GA around the 20th of June. We've got a few minor things to just clean up, and our main feature that is currently being validated, where today we restrict the user or interactive flows to only being able to use Azure CLI and Azure PowerShell. We want to be able to open that up so that you can create any client application to deploy Bicep files, Bicep templates, including graph resources. And today that's restricted, but with this fix, we'll open it up. So that's what we're shooting for. So it was just a quick update. Next slide, please. So not related to a GA update. Myself and folks from the AVM team are interested in understanding from folks whether there's a good place for having Entra resources being part of AVM. So first, you can see some of the questions in terms of whether resource modules and those requirements even make sense for Entra resources, and whether you think they might fit better with the pattern modules versus the resource modules. I think that's one thing that the AVM team is pretty keen to understand. I'm also very keen to understand whether you have any scenarios where you think Entra AVMs would really help you and make life easier for you. So if you have any of those scenarios, please let us know your thoughts in the chat in terms of what you'd like to see out of Entra resources or Entra pattern AVMs. Thanks very much. I don't know if anyone from the AVM team wanted to add anything.
I'm here today, Dan, but I would not add anything to what you just mentioned. I think the question is pretty clear.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Stephanie, you can move on. I think we've got AVM up next anyway.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, Erica, would you like to go ahead?
Absolutely. Yes. Hi, all. This is the first time that I'm presenting in this series, so let me just introduce myself briefly. I'm Erica Gressi. I'm an Azure consultant in Microsoft, and I'm also part of the AVM core team. Stephanie, if you can help me out with the next slide, please. Yes, today we have just one slide and no demo, though hopefully a very exciting one, because we are happy to announce that we just published our first child module, AVM child module, into the public registry. So far, it was only possible to consume a child module through their parents that were published, but currently with this first module and hopefully the next ones, we will be able to consume the child module resources directly. Now the planning for this new feature is made of three phases. The POC phase that we just concluded with this publishing. This is an enablement phase where we were keen to understand if our design was making sense in practice. Then the pilot phase that we just entered. This is mainly about understanding and fixing all the gaps in order to have a scalable approach. That is what we will have in the third and final phase, GA, where we will be able to announce and basically fulfill requests for all the child modules on demand. Now, talking about the POC phase that we just concluded and basically understanding what we have currently available, we have as mentioned, published this module. The chosen one, so to speak, is the VNet subnet, and the reason for that is because that was the most commonly requested resource over time for having that consumed independently. So that's why we've chosen that one. Together with that, we also created a new template in AVM, in the AVM repo, that is specifically for requesting child modules to be published. Now, a couple of notes about that. This is, first of all, about the existing modules that we already have in the code base. So it's not in particular to request a new development, so new child modules to be developed, but only to publish existing modules that we have already implemented. And the second note, just to set the expectations, it is public, so it's technically feasible for you to raise a request at this time. Since we are in the pilot phase, the team is focusing mainly on these gaps towards the GA, so it may be that those requests will not be fulfilled in a shorter time frame, or anyway in the same time that we aim to support once in GA. Now the third thing that we have available, and that's actually the one that took the most effort, is the support in the CI environment. That is, naturally speaking, in the publishing stage, we had to update that in order to publish also the child modules, but also we added multiple new tests, so static validation, compliance, in order to be sure that the publishing complies with our design specs. And above all, we have multiple ones, but just to make an example, we added a test that makes sure that also the child modules will comply with the semantic versioning that we aim to have for all the modules. So also the child modules will have their own versioning, semantic versioning to be fulfilled. Now, talking about the next stops in the journey. Okay, so now that we have in the pilot phase what we are working on and what is missing basically to have a GA. First of all, it's the documentation. So we owe you, the module owners, the module contributors, with clear guidelines on how to perform this publishing and also how to consume the child modules. After that, it's also about selected publishing. So we want to extend. We don't want to, of course, stop at the subnet, but we have a short list of modules, resources that have been requested many times so far. And just to make an example, these are, for instance, the storage account child resources, such as containers or file shares, but also databases in any for instance, SQL servers or others. The third main gap that we are working on currently is towards scaling. So currently we have still a manual step that PR reviewers will need to check, and that is of course error prone. So we are working towards validating that as an automated step. And once that gap will be fulfilled, we will be happy to announce GA and basically have the child modules to be published on demand from the field. Yeah, so that was it from me. Not sure if, I believe we have time for questions, so happy to answer.
Yeah, we definitely have time for questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. There is one in chat. I'm not sure if you would be able to answer that, but it says, where would AVM draw the WAF alignment from graph resources or for graph resources? With Entra, there's a mix between what is surfaced by Defender and the secure score system. You've already locked down things like creating passwords for apps, which is a good thing.
So I believe this is quite related to the previous topic about Entra ID. I'm not sure, honestly, if I am able to answer that, but maybe we can have that as a question in the report itself, if that makes sense. Andres, if
yeah, I answered in chat, but it's not an area that I've looked into very much on Andreas, but I think we can certainly look at those other systems that you suggested, and I added a link to the Microsoft Entra identity standards as well. I don't know if there are things in there that are relevant.
Looking at the chat, I don't see anyone. Otherwise, we're always happy to answer any question in the issue template that also is aiming for that.
Cool. Thanks, Erica.
Thank you.
All right. We have some requested updates. So for wait and retry, Marcin, people have been asking for an update on plans and timeline.
So for wait and retry, we have the Bicep side already done. And we're just basically just have to finish the backend work. Unfortunately, one of the engineers was pulled off to kind of a higher priority problem that she's dealing with that right now. But she will be back on this, and I expect should probably have this out either by like probably end of May is what I would expect this to land. Maybe later if we get delayed with deployments. So yeah, that's pretty much what I would expect for wait and retry. But as soon as we have something, we will make an update. Like we'll do a demo in this Bicep community call, and of course there'll be release notes and such once it's ready to go.
Cool. Hopefully that everyone is happy enough with that answer. Deployment stacks Whatif update. I'm not sure if Marcin, you or someone else wanted to cover this as well.
For deployment stacks Whatif, so we are working on a feature that will allow basically add Whatif to deployment stacks. The primary scenario that we're focusing on is being able to predict which resources will be deleted by a stack when you're updating or deleting the stack. Although if you're deleting, it's easier to figure that out. But we are also going to include the ability to see what configuration changes will be made by the stack, and this will include all of the Whatif improvements that we've already made to deployments Whatif. And on top of that, we are going to leverage the persistent nature of stacks to we found a way to basically reduce the noise in Whatif. Because we can kind of use the fact that we know things in stacks that we basically have done a previous deployment and what was the noise from that, and we can kind of use that to remove basically the noise on subsequent runs. And we're kind of excited to get that out, but it'll probably be at the very end of the work stream. I don't have ETAs to share yet. We're kind of figuring out the costing right now and the resourcing, but we can share that probably in the next community call.
Cool, thanks. What is the general status of Whatif, and when will you show changes that will be done? I'm not sure who best can answer this, actually.
I can jump in. I think the general ethos is that for the current semester of work, which just started in April, Whatif is really one of our high priority items to get right. So there's the components that Marcin was talking about for Whatif and stacks. And then there's the short circuiting issue, which the fix is imminent. It's taken us a little while to roll that out and resolve all the bugs, but that's very active. And then noise reduction is the area of focus after that. And we think that with the new noise reduction algorithm, we really should be able to eliminate 90+% of the noise. But we just have to wait and see on how that goes. But we hear you loud and clear on the need for Whatif to be reliable, and we're going to do our best to make that happen.
Cool, thanks, Alex. Hopefully there's no more questions on that. If there are, please raise your hand or put them in chat. Question for Anthony or Tate. Deploy if not exists. Does this work with Key Vault? For example, for new secrets?
Hey, happy if you want to answer that. Otherwise, I can try and answer it.
Yes, it should work. It should work for any resource that existing can be used for.
What are your work semester periods? When should we expect an update on that next? Alex, I think you might be best to answer that.
Was this in the context of like communicating a deadline? or an ETA for something?
Yeah, sorry, it was on your when you were speaking about the what if periods, and it's a high priority for this current work semester. I was more thinking, what if periods, like you said, it just started in April. When is it kind of expected to end, kind of thing, was my question.
Got it. Yeah, I think it's probably easier if we just try and communicate in terms of dates rather than semesters, because I think that's fairly opaque to people outside of Microsoft. So I think for that particular ETA, do we have, like, could we give a specific date then?
I think we can communicate ETAs for the what if work at the next community call.
Goodness, thank you.
I'll try to make a note for that, so we make sure to cover that.
Yeah.
Chris Lewis made a shout out on Bicep export template. Yeah, it's fully out now, hopefully to all regions. It was slowly rolling out for a while, and we've been working on that kind of really heavily. So we're really happy for that to be out. A question on that, any chance of this being added to the new resource flow in previewing the template in Bicep before deployment? I'm not, for new resource flow, is it like per resource?
Well, when you go into the portal and say, I want to create a new resource, you can build it out. And at the end, before you hit build it, you can say, show me the template. That uses the old interface and only shows the ARM template.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure if we have plans for that just yet.
Okay.
I'm not, yeah, I think this
I
was
didn't know if you
something that
were
was,
doing magic on the back end and how you
no,
were doing that.
unfortunately. Yeah, that was a little bit of different work, not using the same, I guess, API that we built.
Yeah.
Anthony, I think I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think there are any plans to do that right now, but do we have an issue to collect feedback on that? Because I think it would help us prioritize if we got that feedback, because I see a lot of thumbs up on your comment there.
Yeah, I'll throw it in. But yeah, I mean, all in all, this was amazingly fantastic.
Great to hear. Yeah, I'm glad. I think a lot of people have been wanting this for a while, so we're really happy to be able to share it.
It makes the Terraform people jealous.
Yes. Well, it's coming out in Terraform as well. We've been working with them, but I think there's been some issues come up. We were hoping they could come out at the same time, but they'll be coming out in some time.
No, it's awesome.
Thank you. If not exists, used within deployment stacks, will it delete the resource? I'm not quite sure if we have stacks.
I think the question is just I think we need to make sure that if someone is using that declaration in a deployment stacks, like it works as expected with deployment stacks. So I think if we don't know the answer to that already, we should definitely follow up on that one.
Okay, cool.
I think that it should not delete with current, but if it ends up deleted, then we definitely need to look into that. But there should be a provisioning job for the resource that will just skip the deployment, not delete it.
Thanks for confirming.
Oh, this was a question. I think I misunderstood the question in the chat then, because I was thinking of like deploy if not exist policies instead of the new like check existence functions. I'm going to delete my comment from the chat.
All good. And Angel, I'm not sure if you're able to unmute and speak here, but yep. Angel gave, if you could share the milestones.
Yeah, so I shared the milestones in the chat. Feel free to ask any questions around these. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can. But yes, there is some sequencing happening here. More specifically, the need to roll out deployment stacks what if first, to then be able to build on top of that what we call internally as noise reduction, as Marcin mentioned. One thing to share is just that we're going to aim to default the what if result to always have the noise already removed. and then we'll give a flag for if you so choose. If you want to have the full response with the extra noise, you could also get that as well. But our expectation is that the response with the noise removed is what most folks will be using moving forward.
Cool. Thanks, Angel. There was a question in chat. If the resource is deployed via stacks initially and after another deployment, it is not in the stacks, will it be deleted? And Marcin answered, yes, as of right now, that's the design.
But we're going to look at it, we're going to look at improving that to make sure that it works within expectations.
Cool. Sounds good. All right, I think that's it on requested updates. Emily.
Hi, sorry about that. It took me a second to get my unmute off.
All good. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so we are hoping to, in the last few minutes of the call, collect some feedback on how all of you use AI or Copilot to support your deployment workflows. So I've prepared a survey that I'm going to send out now, and we'd really, really appreciate it if folks can just take a few minutes during the call. Let us know if the link does not work for you, but I just dropped it in the chat. So if you take a few minutes now to take a look at the questions and fill them out. I just saw a hand go up for a second. Was there a question?
No, it was supposed to be a reaction. It works.
Okay, awesome. And on the Copilot piece, feel free also to add comments in the chat if you want to have a discussion with one another or come off mute if you have any direct feedback. But the form will allow us to kind of collect and record your feedback more easily so we can take it into account as we prioritize what AI features and to be building in the future. I'm seeing a couple of comments in the chat about some negative Copilot experiences. And what's really helpful for us in those cases is if you can fill out the form and indicate which tools you are using, because we have different levels of input and control into different tools. For example, some tools our team has direct support or communication with, and other tools we don't have any connection to necessarily. Based on the feedback, we can do a follow-up in a future community call with our recommendations for Bicep and AI or Bicep and Copilot use, and go over some best practices or success stories to help folks. But I think for now, we're still trying to collect information on what people are using, what people have discovered themselves. And so just to be even more specific, I see, for example, Copilot. Someone's been using Copilot for a while and they've been finding it very handy. Do you mean Copilot like GitHub Copilot and VS Code, Copilot, the Microsoft Copilot app? There's a few different platforms that use similar
Copilot,
wording.
mostly VS Code. Indeed.
GitHub Copilot and VS Code. Okay. And are you using the @Azure extension when you're using GitHub Copilot and VS Code?
Yep, but mostly the Bicep extension itself, and also alternating, sometimes using Claude and other modules.
So I hear you say the Bicep extension. I think I was talking about something slightly different actually. For the Azure extension, it's specifically when you're in the Copilot chat in VS Code and you can do like @ Azure, and then that pulls context from Azure, an Azure extension within that chat window. Was that what you had discovered, Diogo?
No, just general code completion and context using in the sometimes chat, sometimes inline completion, but.
Okay, I'm going to add a link in the chat to for what I was talking about.
Yep, sure.
There's also now the agent mode versus the chat mode. I'd be curious to see if folks have come across agent mode in VS Code.
I was going to mention that. I was going to say I literally only just saw that today. I was going to ask about it and how it's used. I've not read up on it yet or anything, but I figured that while we're on this call, a summary might be helpful if you've got time.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear what you were saying there.
Sorry. So the agent mode in VS Code, I've just discovered that today, but I've not read up on it, and I don't know if it'd be useful to have a quick summary on what it'd be used for.
Right. Yeah. I think the first step on that is, had you come across this blog post that I just put in the chat?
I haven't, no, but I'll make sure I go and read that.
Yeah, start with that blog post, and then maybe we could put it on the agenda for a future community call. Maybe next time around, we could prepare a demo in advance that could be helpful.
That's brilliant. Thanks.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Just taking a look at comments here, but it seemed like a lot flowed in at once. Was there anything that folks wanted to bring up off mute? Yeah, I see a couple of people didn't know about this @Azure option in VS Code. So I can just speak to it very briefly. And I've added the blog post to the chat. But essentially, when you're in the VS Code Copilot chat window and you're on ask mode as opposed to agent mode, you can see, I'll share right here a GIF that's within that blog post where you can provide extra context to, so Azure specific, when you do this @Azure tag here, and then you ask something like update my storage account, Bicep has contributed context to this @Azure extension so that it has more knowledge, information on Bicep to draw from when it's answering your question. Whereas if you don't put that @Azure tag into the chat, it's just using whatever it was generally trained on versus having a Bicep specific addition or Bicep specific context. Again, I'm using context. It's not necessarily a technical term. I'm just trying to speak in broad strokes here. Is there any questions on that new functionality? This has all come out recently, so no worries if you haven't come across it yet. So yes, it provides extra Bicep context to the response to your prompt, John. So you would ask the same prompt that you would whether you've tagged @Azure or you have not tagged @Azure, but then it enables the language model to draw from some Bicep context that we've provided on our end when it's generating your response. Did that answer your question? And if you've been using other tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Microsoft Copilot or whatever else you may have been using, if you can indicate that in the form that we filled out, that's really helpful because we want to meet you where you're at as well and understand what's a natural piece of your deployment flow. This is just one piece of the puzzle that we've been supporting on the Microsoft side. And so, Thomas, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't realize we were about to speak at the same time then. So at the company where I've really recently joined it, and they're only just starting down the infrastructure as code journey. So I've been creating a lot of the templates kind of from scratch or using the verified modules where I can. But the ones I've created by scratch, I've noticed that it defaults to a really old API version. The linter catches that and it's quite easy to fix, but I just don't know whether that's something that's amendable or adjustable in GitHub, in Copilot, sorry. Or is that something it just needs to learn over time that it needs to just try and find the latest one?
Oh, you've noticed that when you use Copilot chat, it defaults to a really old version?
Yeah, yes. So yeah, that's with using the Azure thing in the chat.
And that's with
Azure.
Azure.
Yes, yeah. I just didn't know whether it was something other people had come across or whether it was an issue at all.
That's helpful feedback. That's really good to know. I think we're still in the beginning stages of collecting feedback on this. Looks like maybe a couple of folks in the chat have had the same issue as well.
Yeah, I'll make sure it's in the form as well. But yeah.
Yeah, that would be great to have it in the form as well. Thank you.
I love how so many people are really excited and very passionate about this topic. So please definitely share as much of your feedback in that form. We would love to gather it all and hope maybe possibly follow up to see if there's anything we can see about your specific.
Yeah, and there's a place in the form to add your name and email as optional if you'd like to potentially be contacted for follow-up. So no pressure on that, but I think I'm one of the product managers working on our Copilot tooling, and I'm really excited to get your feedback and work with you to understand your experience and needs on the Copilot and AI front. So please feel free to add your email there if you want to be contacted, or just leave your feedback in the form. You can also email me directly. Stephanie, is it all right if I put my email in the chat?
Yeah, I think that's totally fine.
Okay. So I've just added my email in the chat. If you want to contact me directly about any of the Copilot or AI piece after this call, I'll be happy to discuss with you, share tips, and definitely noted that people are interested in some kind of demo or how-to on some of the tools that we've worked on, like that at Azure agent and chat mode. So we can consider that for the next community call.
Cool. I also put it on the slide deck for those who are watching the recording as well.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah. And we are at time. So was there a question that you wanted to answer, Emily?
Question. It looks like there's just general discussion in the chat. Did anybody have any questions that were missed?
I think that was it.
I think we're okay. Yeah.
Cool. All right, then. Hopefully there aren't any further questions, but if there are, you can, I think the meeting chat stays open for maybe half a day before everything gets deleted, but we'll make sure to try to answer as many questions in the chat as you guys have. That being said, thank you everyone for coming, and hopefully we'll have some good updates for you guys next community call. So please feel free to show up next month. And thank you everyone for coming. I know that this time conflicts with the PowerShell community call and the Terraform community call, so sorry about that. We'll make sure to not have it conflict next month, but we wanted to make sure we get this information in and get the feedback in by the end of the month. So yeah, thanks everyone.